25 years after its release, The Fast and the Furious stands as one of the most influential action films of the 21st century. Now, I gotta say, I'm genuinely blown away that Fast and the Furious was 25 years ago. Like, I can't believe that movie was 25 years ago. What happened to time, bro? Like, I just did 25 years for Jurassic Park 3, 25 years for Fast and the Furious. It's been this is crazy. And what began as a modest street racing crime thriller, it evolved into like a global franchise that like grossed so much money at the box office, like a disgusting amount of money. And it actually redefined the blockbuster action. It actually introduced audiences to one of cinema's most like enduring themes, which is family. Looking back, it's actually kind of remarkable, to see like how this film like laid the foundation for everything that followed. I do want to stretch that out. When I did my Fast Five video not that long ago, it did like Fast and the Furious literally did is kind of responsible for like some weird change in blockbuster movies. It's insane, but it's so true. A movie that was about heist and regular car pushing and just street racing became one of the biggest blockbuster films for about a decade. Like it's wild, man. And directed by Rob Cohen, who I don't think I've seen another film by him. I know he like you never know you're going to be responsible for one of the biggest franchises of his time until like later on down the road. I don't think he knew directing this movie, which was probably not supposed to get a sequel, was going to go on to be an 11 film, multi-billion-dollar franchise. Hey, hands off to him. Now, as I was going into like the plot, the film stars Brian O'Connor, an undercover LAP officer tasked with infiltrating Los Angeles' underground street racing scene to investigate a string of high speed truck hijackings. As Brian grows closer to charismatic racer Dominic Toretto and falls in love with Dom's sister Mia, he finds himself torn between his duty as a police officer and his loyalty to the people he has come to respect. That conflict becomes the emotional heartbeat of the film and remains one of the greatest strengths. Something people really don't remember, and I think people should always remember this, in the first Fast and the Furious movie, Brian is the main character. It is more about Brian than it is about Dom. Yes, Dom is the second leading man of the film, but Brian O'Connor is the main character. I know it's hard to believe because where the franchise turns and goes eventually, but Brian is the main character. And a lot of people tend to forget that, but it's true. And at its core, The Fast and the Furious is it's much more than like a film about cars. It actually is a story about like identity, trust, brotherhood, friendship, loyalty, all that kind of belonging type of feeling. And the franchise would like later become known for globe-trotting, espionage, and larger than life action sequences. But the original film is so grounded, and the characters and the relationships within the street racing community, the personal stakes make every race a confrontation almost, and decisions feel a little bit more meaningful. That is something I always thought was missing in the later films. Was like the stakes are so big, you kind of forget about the small ones. And the stakes in Fast One is pretty much you could lose this car or you might get popped, yo. Which one you want to do? And Fast like Six, it's like, yo, there's this like world threatening thing, and there's like this plane that we can't like take off at the end, and people getting thrown in the turbines. It's wild, but it's awesome. And like one of the film's greatest achievements for anything is like it introduced audiences to Vin Diesel as Dom Toretto, and who will become one of modern action cinema's most recognizable icons. And like I said, it's funny that Dom isn't even supposed to be the main focus of the film like that. It's Brian, but Dom is one of the more recognizable icons for the movies going forward. And Diesel's commanding performance, it really established Dom as a leader driven by loyalty, this unwavering commitment to those he considers family. And alongside Paul Walker's Brian, provides like the perfect counterbalance, delivering that charismatic and emotionally conflicted performance that anchors the story. Their chemistry would be the cornerstone pretty much of the entire franchise after this. I mean, yeah, in Too Fast, Too Furious, Vin Diesel didn't come back, but the sequence at the end of the film is mentioned, and that's something to at least counteract that. Okay, this is a direct sequel from this one, and it's not just going to ignore the events. And then Tokyo Drift came out of nowhere. Nobody from the original two were in it. And then Vin Diesel shows up at the end, like, I knew Han, let's race. And it's like, okay, cool. And then Fast Four happened. And that kind of brought everyone from the originals back. But again, and Dom and Brian's relationship is explored even more then, and that's when they kind of become the cornerstones of the franchise. Now, I don't think that the racing scenes in Fast One are particularly the best. If I had to pick my favorite movie where I really love the racing, I love Too Fast Too Furious. The racing in two had so much like so much adrenaline to them, so much fun, so much cheer. You know, the neon lights as they're racing at nighttime. A lot of the big races happen at night. You had the double race. You know what I'm saying? Like, I just think that the final race in Fast and Furious One is memorable because it sets up the franchise pretty much going forward. But a lot of the race scenes in Fast One don't really do it for me that much. I do think the practical stunt work and the practical effects and the film's gritty visual style does actually work really well, and it actually really captures that excitement of like early 2000s, and it's so beautiful to look at. The truck heists are great, and I do think, as I said, the final race actually makes you feel something. You feel like there's something here that they're trying to get. There's like this certain goal. And going into the film is like it became like a cultural phenomenon and introduced many audiences to the like imported car scene, modified Japanese sports cars, street racing culture, customization, and performance tuning suddenly entered mainstream pop culture. Video games, music, fashion, automotive enthusiasts around the world. Fast and the Furious did do that. Nobody talked about putting Nas in their car until Fast and the Furious. And then games had not Nas in cars after that. Like Steve for Speed, hell, even Grand Theft Auto San Andreas, if you put the right cheat code in, you could have Nas in like your cars. And like that was not a big talk of like having these type of things done to your car, these decals, these neon lights. Like Fast and the Furious really changed the world in a weird phenomenon when it came to like cars and stuff like that. It was just not done at the time. And then you get into the 2000s and this movie comes out, everybody had like the decal, not everybody, but people who were in that scene, and that's really what Fast and the Furious was responsible for. Now, looking back after 25 years, it is fascinating to see how much the franchise did evolve. Like today's Fast and Furious film would feature like international missions, some crazy elaborate stunts, global spanning adventures, but none of it would exist without this one. Like the first really grounded, pretty straightforward, normal film. Like if you watch Fast One and then watch Fast Six, it is a completely different franchise by that point. And you're like, how did we get from street racing and carjackings and undercover FBI stuff every now and then to full blown these niggas are superheroes? Like it is pretty much insane. And beyond launching one of Hollywood's biggest franchises, the Fast and Furious also carries the additional emotional weight of just having to live with the loss of probably one of the main star at first of the franchise. But 25 years later, I do think Fast and Furious remains an entertaining blend of like action, crime, drama, street race culture, and it's the beginning of one of the biggest Hollywood franchises to date. Now, on some side notes for me, I think that Dom Toretto speech when he's talking about what ended up him up in jail. I think that scene is done really well. I think Vin Diesel does a really good job in that scene for the most part. Like I think he's just really good. I think the characters all react pretty realistically to certain things. Brian, in my opinion, is still really cool. Like I love Brian O'Connor as a character, but he's definitely not as cool in my opinion as he is in two. Like Brian's a much cooler character come Too Fast Too Furious, and pretty much what we see of him going forward after that, and that says something because I still like Brian in the first one. I do think Fast and the Furious one is not like my favorite of the franchise because, like I said, four or five, like five, six, and seven are easily like so damn good. Like they're just so just fun and invigorating and just like adrenaline rush. But one has that back in the day feel that I just can't ignore sometimes. And to see Vin Diesel when he still had the hairline a little bit, but it was still kind of bald, and before he was talking like this all the time, it was just kind of cool going back to see young Vin Diesel, even though he was like 34 in in the first one. But I do have to say, it introduced the world to Michelle Rodriguez and Jordana Brewster, which, funny enough, they neither of them had their license when they filmed this movie. Just want to throw that out there. So, yeah, I do think Fast and the Furious is still pretty good. I do like it a lot. There are some aspects where I'm like, Brian should have just caught them, but he doesn't because the movie kind of still needs to happen. But that's pretty much it, though. I still think Fast and the Furious, after 25 years, is still one of the more groundbreaking franchises because it becomes one of the biggest franchises in the world. That being said, I think I'm going to sign off. Like, comment, subscribe for more. I'll see you guys on the next one.